Hey, what's good? This video is sponsored by Labz.com. The Labz is basically a platform that makes owning the rights to your work as easy as file sharing and writing lyrics. The Labz is a collaborative workspace that provides automated tracking, rights management, and protection of your music files during and after you create. Backed by blockchain, store your music and share securely with the Labz. So whether you're an inspiring writer or a seasoned vet, the Labz is the safest way to collaborate and share your music. Create, collab, and protect with the Labz. Go check it out, folks. Yo, what's good? My name is Reginald, aka the R-Star, aka Mr. Straight Fire. And if you're familiar with my channel, you know that I do Eminem songs breakdown mostly, but this video is different. I had the opportunity to do an interview with Tommy Coster Jr. Tommy is the composer, producer, and musician, and more importantly, he was the keyboardist for Dr. Dre in the era of the Marshall Mathers LP and Get Rich or Die Trying. So in this video, you're gonna hear the real story about the Real Slim Shady, how he came up with it, and everything surrounding it. So here's the interview. So you said one of the most memorable sessions was the Real Slim Shady, so let's get into that. So according to multiple sources, and even in Eminem's book, there was a lot of pressure to find the first singles, and you guys came up with the Real Slim Shady. So just tell me the whole story, your involvement in it, how it was created, like from top to bottom.
So my recollection obviously is going to be from my point of view.
Yes, that's what I want to hear.
So I'm going to, in my humble opinion, this is what I remember. And it was a really interesting situation because the record was done as far as I knew. And we were in the studio.
Was it mastered? Like, was it already mastered?
No. It was just like, I heard it was done, right?
Okay.
So we're in the studio working on something. I don't really remember what it was. But M was in the room, Dre was in the room, myself, Mike Elizondo, Segal, the engineer, and maybe a couple of other people, but I don't know. I don't remember. And Jimmy walks in. And you have with someone else, it's one of his friends or somebody from the label.
Does the room change?
Oh yeah.
Jimmy walks in?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Not in a bad way, but Jimmy commands a room. Jimmy's a badass, man. So, and you have to understand where Jimmy came from. I
just want to say for people listening, we're talking about Jimmy Iovine,
Jimmy Iovine,
at the head of Interscope Records.
So he walks into the studio. And he sits down, he's got all this energy, and he's sitting there, and he's got a lot of positive energy. And he says, listen, this record is incredible. But we need one single to open up the record because the record is very dark. And he was concerned that there wasn't going to be a first single that was going to launch this record and cross all genres, all demographics, and have it be something that was more playful and more accessible by the demographic, the larger demographic than just the hardcore hip hop fans.
Right.
So when he said that, obviously I was just listening. I just happened to be in the room. So I'm like a fly on the wall at that point. And I see Dre and M kind of look at each other like, okay, okay, because you can't not say okay to Jimmy. I mean, he's earned the right to say something like that and at least open the door for that conversation. So Jimmy leaves, and I don't think anything of it. We finished our session. Now I don't know what happened between that moment and the moment when I got called to go into the studio, and when I arrived, Larry Chapman saying, you guys are writing M's single today. It wasn't very far. It was a couple of days, but I don't know what happened between that moment and when I was in the studio that day. So if they were looking for a beat between that moment and a few days later, I know nothing about that.
Okay.
So I can't say that happened or that didn't happen.
Okay.
So a few days later, I get a call from Larry, come to the studio. I come to the studio. He says, you know what you guys are working on today? I'm like, no. And he goes, Eminem's first single. And I'm like, okay. So after all these months of working on this record and all these talented people, we're supposed to pull a single out of the bag today that's going to compete with this brilliant music that's been massaged and worked on for the past several months. okay, well, I'll do my best. So eventually everybody shows up. It's myself, Mike Elizondo,
That's the bass. He's
Eminem,
the bass
bass
and
player,
guitarist, right?
right?
Yeah, bass
And
player.
also co-producer, co-writer.
Yeah.
Seagal, who's the engineer, and Dre. Now, there's a loop that's cycling, that's looping, a drum loop that's looping on an MPC 3000 or whatever MPC at the time.
Yeah.
And it's looping, and M's on the couch with a jacket over his head because he's tired.
What
He's
time was it?
frustrated.
What time was it? Like during the day?
Early afternoon.
Okay.
And he's frustrated because he knows he's not going to like the song, because M does not write music to be popular. M writes what he wants to write. He's a very authentic artist.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's under his jacket. He's not moving. I'm playing keys. Mike's playing bass. Seagal's like got his arms back in the chair. He's like chilling. Nothing is happening. Dre had left the room to go out and have a meeting.
When you say nothing is happening, there's nothing playing.
M's not moving. Okay. Seagal's bored. I'm like on the keys. Mike's on the bass. Like Dre's not in the room. I'm like, okay. So I tell Seagal, hey, mute my keyboard. And what that means is there's 2 buttons on the mixing console, left and right stereo. Just hit the mute button so that you can't hear my keyboard anymore in the room. Okay. I don't want anybody to hear what I'm doing. Now the beat is very loud in the room.
For what reason? Because
I wanted some private time to myself to work something out.
I see.
So I put some headphones on. I can still hear the beat because it's quite loud in the room and it's bleeding through the phones. And I said to myself, Tommy, you've been working with Dre and everybody in the camp for quite some time now. What have you learned? Like, what have you learned? And I'm thinking, and I'm like, well, classical sounds, classical chord progressions. It has to be a very kind of playful, fun melody. And, obviously a lot of stuff is written at a certain BPM. So the BPM was already kind of in motion with the drum loop cycling. So I was at Korg in Dorsey at the time. I still am. I still endorse Korg. And I start flipping through sounds on a Triton, and I come up with a harpsichord sound. And I'm like, well, that's kind of fun and funky, And I'm a jazz musician at heart. So if you listen to that melody, the Marshall Mathers on the Real Slim Shady, if you listen to that melody, right?
Yeah.
So that's basically a C minor scale with a major 7. So if I have a piano and I'm playing a piano sound, so if you listen to that melody, it can be used on a jazz progression as part of a solo or part of a melody. So that line is very conducive to like my Mediterranean jazz kind of vibe.
Right, yeah.
So it's really interesting that certain friends of mine actually said, man, when we heard that song, bro, we knew that was your stuff. So anyway, so I've got the headphones on, I've got the harpsichord sound, and I'm like, man, I kind of like this cute little melody thing. So I said, hey, Seagal, unmute my keyboard. And I start banging that out to the MPC beat. And M comes from behind his jacket and he's like, Tommy, keep playing that. I'm like, okay. So I just keep playing it. I look at Mike, he looks at me, and Mike writes the bass line, which fit perfectly with what, I was playing. He's like, so, So it's like a counterpoint part to what I was playing.
Yeah.
Brilliantly written by him. So he's playing that. He figures that out. He's playing that. And we're just cycling. M's writing. Then he runs out of the room, brings Dre in. Dre listens for a second and just thumbs up, looks at everybody, thumbs up, walks back out, finishes his meeting. Later, he comes back in and reprograms the drum beat so that it is following more the bass line and the melody and kind of working better with what we had written than what was there before. And that is how the Real Slim Shady came to be. A week later, I came back to do the rest of the parts with Dre. There was a chord progression that I wrote that worked really well, which is just that's just a very classical. And it just repeats. And then Dre wanted a little transition going into different parts, so there's some sixth in there. He wanted a timpani roll. And then the guitar solo at the end is me on a keyboard bending notes on a chord Triton. They're like, oh, we got to get a guitar solo in there at the end. And I'm like, oh, you mean like this? And I just started, because I'm a big lead synth player as well. And I said, oh, like this? And they're like, yeah. And then we worked out the
Is
little
there
melody.
a flute at the end?
No, that's a guitar patch on a chord keyboard.
Oh.
They might have EQ'd it a bit so that it sounded like that, but they originally wanted a guitar.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I always thought it was a flute. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Now I see.
And that was it, bro. And honestly, so now I find myself in a really interesting position because I know that not only did I come up with the concept, but I'm a co-writer on this now, right?
Yeah.
So I had to, at some point, I had to talk to Dre about that, and he was amazing, and there was no question about what had gone down,
and that's what I was saying before. I think because people see Dre produced by Dre, and then other people are working with him, and people think that he's just trying to take credit, and I feel that's just a false image that's portrayed out there by Dr. Dre. Because then when you hear a story like yours, it's like he's totally fine with it, and I don't know. It's really nice to hear that from you.
Yeah, Dre is everything that Dre put his name on, as far as I know, but I didn't know him before 1999.
Right.
He was the guy behind it all, bro. I mean, Dre is sincerely one of the most talented, nicest people I've ever worked for. And like, he would just blow my mind. I mean, just look at all of his work. You can't take anything away from that guy.
No, you can't.
And every time he walked away from a situation that he was uncomfortable with or had run its course, he went and built another empire, and it did even better. So you can't, actions speak louder than words. Definitely. People are always going to talk, about people, but that's just the price you pay when you're successful. So.
And one rumor that's out there is that the Real Slim Shady song was finalized like hours before the album was due. Like, is there any truth to that?
I think that it was finished very closely to the release date, but the release date, I think, of the Real Slim Shady was sometime in April, and then I think the record came out in May.
Yeah, I think it's might be a month.
April 17th or 15th or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and the record was May 23rd. Yeah.
Yeah, May 23rd exactly. So again, Jimmy had come in and made this request, and Dre and myself and Em and Mike fulfilled that ask, and we got lucky because I don't know if you know this, you probably do, but when an artist does a record, sometimes there are thousands of pieces of music that are submitted to that artist to check and listen to consider for their record.
Right.
Like Celine Dion could have 2,000 songs submitted for her record.
Wow. Yeah.
This was like when the Real Slim Shady happened, it was like Moses parted the sea because there was no pushback from anybody. There was no pushback from M. There was no pushback from Dre. There was no pushback from Jimmy, Interscope, Universal. The song just fell from the universe into our laps at that moment. And it just, we finished it and it went out and it was released and it blew up. It was an A+ single. It was like, it was like a perfect storm, because half the time you write something and it doesn't even make the record, or half the time you write something and think it's going to be gain traction and do well, and it doesn't do that well. So I'll never forget how well that was received and how easy that process was. But again, we're talking about writing something very simple that follows those formulas in pop songwriting, which is keep it simple.
But it's also a very unique melody. Like, it just, the sound, the harp that you said, like, it sounds that you never heard before on a rap record.
I did notice a lot of harpsichords being used after that, and I chuckled about that. So.
Yeah, that is very true, because I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, this is not a sound I've ever heard before. It was just definitely something that was unique. So you did that in that one day. How was, like, Eminem's, or the whole everyone's, like, morale, was it low? Did you feel the tension, the pressure that people had?
No. I felt that the only thing I felt was that M wanted to get back to Detroit to see his daughter. You know, at that time his daughter was very young and he was missing her, and he wanted to go home. He was tired. He'd been working on this record for a while, and I didn't feel there wasn't any negative energy. There wasn't anything like that. But he was just tired, you know. And every time I was in the studio, the energy was always really, really good. At least for me, it was. I was just enjoying it. And I stayed out of the way, though. I was just the guy sitting behind a keyboard, and when I was spoke to, you know, I did something and that I was asked to do, and I wasn't walking in there and saying, hey, I got this song idea. I wasn't walking in there and saying, hey, Dre, I think you should produce this way. I just would show up and do what I was asked to do. And that day they asked me to be a part of a co-write, and I feel like I was given enough talent and enough experience and awareness to help create that solution for that ask that Jimmy asked for. So
now I want to thank Tommy for the time and the opportunity that he gave me to do an interview with him. I learned a lot. So throughout the week, I'm going to release some clips of the interview and then finally release the whole thing. So until then, this has been Unabashedly Reggie. Thanks. It's been real.